Welcome to the Office of Demonology. My name is Dr. J, retired demon hunter and knower of things, and today I'm going to review The Rising by Brian Keene.
Welcome to the Office of Demonology.
Sometimes through no fault of its own, a book can't stand the test of time. Released 20 years ago, The Rising by Brian Keene suffers from oversaturation in the past 2 decades of zombies. This book might have been a blast to read back in the day, which was 2004, I believe, so that's 20 years ago. And at that time, 2003 was the Walking Dead comic book, so this was right at the start of it all. And like I said, probably a blast to read back in the day, but now it's kind of like eating reheated pizza from last week. At first it was tasty, but now it's just kind of meh. Let's talk about the story. The dead are returning to life, intelligent, determined, and very hungry. Escape seems impossible for Jim Thurman, one of the few left alive in this nightmare world. But Jim's young son is also alive and in grave danger hundreds of miles away. Despite astronomical odds, Jim vows to find him or die trying. Joined by an elderly preacher, a guilt-ridden scientist, and an ex-prostitute, Jim sets out on a cross-country rescue mission. Together they must battle the living and the living dead, and the even greater evil awaiting them at their journey's end. Now, if this sounds familiar, it's pretty much because it's the plot of every zombie apocalypse. So how's it different? Well, what Brian Keene did is have the zombies actually be intelligent. They can talk, they can drive cars, they can shoot guns. And to me, this raises the question, are they really zombies? In an effort to be different, the zombies feel more human than they do zombie. And I feel like I'm missing out on zombies in my zombie fiction. In addition to this, animals are returning from the dead. You got it. Birds, packs of dogs, deer, etc. Let's just stick with birds. The latest estimates put the number of birds worldwide somewhere between 50 billion and 430 billion. We are so outnumbered. Probably would have worked out better if he just kind of made a zombie birds, like take what Hitchcock did, but make them zombie birds. That's all you need. There are just too many threats in this book. The zombie birds, the zombie dogs, zombie deer, all other animals that are zombies. You have zombie humans that are intelligent, that can shoot guns, that are very similar to the military who's out there. And on top of that, some kind of evil consciousness. I don't know. But where I really feel the story suffers is in the characters. Each character is painted with very broad strokes. I don't find myself caring for any of them. And what it is, it's head swapping throughout the whole thing. It feels like it's trying to be The Stand by Stephen King. You have a character who is slow and also deaf, much like the character in Stephen King's The Stand. You have a prostitute, you have the priest, but none of them really you care about. They're not really painted in detail. This hurts the story because I need to care when we get into the violence. And on top of that, the women characters, they could have been done a lot better. I really feel like they were poorly handled. Where the book really shines is in the horror. And of course, it's a horror book. It should have horror in it. But I think that the violence and horror in it actually is a detriment to the story because we get to this place where it's just violence for violence sakes. And like I said, there's no care about the characters, so I'm not really feeling much for these characters who are just being put through situations almost because it feels like, oh, this would be fun to hurt somebody like this. And I get it. I love horror. And I get that this is what a lot of people may want in their book. But for me, I honestly really have to care enough, or otherwise it's just people being killed for the sake of being killed. For me, I need characterization and story, and I need to care. If I care about the character, you can be as violent as you want, because then I'm going to really feel what the character's feeling. And finally, The ending felt like it left out some piece of the puzzle. The story is teasing you the whole time with a question: is Jim going to succeed? And as a reader, you expect to find out how that resolves. Don't leave me hanging at the end. And now I get that The Rising, now I didn't get this when I picked it up at the Goodwill in the thrift store, but The Rising is the first in a series of zombie books. However, as a writer, if you're thinking of doing a series, it should be a book that stands on its own, whether you ever get that second book out or not. Don't make me have to buy the second book to find out how the first book resolves. Resolve the first book, leave some breadcrumbs that can be explored in a future novel, but you need to resolve the story in the first book. You need to have the character have some kind of resolution, not a cliffhanger, because now, first of all, there's too many books out in the world for me to read. I am not going to go invest in a story that didn't satisfy me in the first story. I'm not going to keep going. Too many books out there for me to read. I want one that's going to satisfy me, not leave me hanging, which feels like a money grab. Oh, you want to know how this really ends? Buy my second book. No, 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 no. So is the book rereadable? Will I hold on to it, maybe investigate it in the future? Absolutely not, I'm not. It's going back to the thrift store. So that's my thoughts on The Rising by Brian Keene. I would give this book 3 stars. Now, Brian Keene's been around for the past 20 years. So if I were you and you wanted to read his book, maybe pick up something newer. And I can't recommend because it's the only Brian Keene book I read. But maybe pick up something newer instead of investing, unless you want to invest in 4 or 5 books of The Rising, go for it. But to me, it failed me, and I will not read anything more when it comes to The Rising. Maybe I'll pick up one of his newer books, but not this. I can't invest my time in a book that's going to fail me at the end and expect me to pay more to find out what I should have found out in the first book. If you like this type of content, hit that subscribe, the bell, and I'll be back soon with another video.